Good evening, everybody. It is January 20th, and this is the school committee meeting. Start by reading our vision statement. The Ashland Public Schools cultivates the academic and social-emotional growth of each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA Cable TV, and the order of business this evening includes the opening, procedures, agenda review, and adoption. I'm not sure if we have any presentations, Jim.
Nope.
No. We'll take a moment for public comment. Our administrative items include the superintendent's update, COVID-19 update, the equity audit, approval of funds and awarding contract, open meeting law complaint resolution, Mr. Steve Morgan, MASC update on resolutions, Mark Terry, minimum wage increase, assistant superintendent's update, warrant approvals, appointment of director of student services search subcommittee. The consent actions include the approval of minutes, January 6, 2022, acceptance of gifts and donations, committee reports of activities, member updates, action items, and then we will adjourn. So I will take the roll call, the attendance, and make sure that everybody's okay with the agenda this evening, starting with you, Paul Kendall.
Here and yes.
Tina Fatanides.
Here and yes.
Aaron Williams.
Here and yes.
Mark Terry.
Here and yes.
Okay, thank you. And we have no presentations this evening, so I'll start by asking if there's anybody here from the public who would like to give a comment. And I don't see anybody. That's not us at the moment. But some of you are residents. This is your big chance. All right, seeing none, we will move on to the superintendent update for COVID-19 first, Jim.
Great, thank you. As always, there's ever-changing direction from the state level, but for a change, they actually, went with exactly what we were going to do here in Ashland, believe it or not, which is great. So yesterday, it was announced by the governor, as well as the commissioner, that they're moving towards a surveillance model of testing, if you will, where every member who opts in, and I want to be clear, it's an opt-in, not an opt-out. So families will be receiving an email and letters that will be going home, staff as well, so they can opt into the surveillance testing. So what that will look like is every 2 weeks, those who opt in will receive a test kit of 2 tests, 2 antigen tests that will be brought home. Audrey and I are working out the details as to how we're going to administer, meaning what day of the week makes good sense for us to do the testing. So everyone every 2 weeks will get a box of 2 tests, and then they'll use those for 2 weeks, then they'll get replenished and keep going. So let's assume that the state will have a better supply chain intact, and that we can certainly roll these out. In addition to that, we will continue to do symptomatic testing in school. So if someone is symptomatic in school, they will come to the nurse's office. That's faculty, staff, vaccinated or unvaccinated, doesn't matter, which is what I said we were going to do anyway, and the state is going down the same path. We will test those individuals in school, and it's been actually, thank goodness we sort of went down that path. We've been able to catch a number of folks by doing so. Then from there, we're still working on thinking about folks who are testing positive, and while we have a certain line of, that it's drawn in the sand when the clock starts, if you will. So if I test today, but I was symptomatic yesterday, my clock started yesterday, right? The date, the earlier of the date, so being symptomatic and or the test date. And so that's what we call day 0. And then we add 5 more days on. So it's really 6 days. And the individual could come back as long as their symptoms are improving. They haven't had a fever, which Omicron, is some, and we're not getting fevers for every child especially with the Omicron. But they have to be fever free for 48 hours, no medicine to reduce it. But Audrey and I are talking about, do we want to figure out a way of adding another layer of protection? So potentially, and I'm not saying we're going to do this, but because there's logistical issues as well as supply issues. We're thinking we might want to actually open up an avenue for families who are at home or who have isolated and now are coming in on day 6, that we might test them again with an antigen test. What we know is that if the antigen test is negative, they're most likely not carrying a viral load enough to pass it on. People are still required to be masked, et cetera, based on guidelines. But that being said, if they're come in and they've had COVID and their viral load still indicates that they're still positive, the recommendation and the guidelines say then that they should continue to quarantine until they get a negative antigen. That's something she and I are trying to figure out. Is it logistically possible for us to do? And the test kits that are coming home or going home are not designed for families just to use at a whim. They're going to be designed as surveillance testing. So it's every Wednesday or Thursday, whatever we decide that day is. If you would agree to opt into the program, that's when you're going to do the test. And we'll have a form that if someone is positive, and it's only if you're positive, will you report it. There'll be a Google form that's being created that families, staff members, whatever, can just fill out, and then it pops up on our screen here in the district. So we'll know. Right now what's happening is when folks are using the antigen test, they are calling in and or sending emails to our nursing staff, sometimes to principals, sometimes to teachers, before we even know at the nursing level or at the administrative level. So that's really the hot take from the commissioner and the governor's new approach. Obviously, it's one I agree with because that's what we were going to do anyway. And we still have, as I assured staff, we still have access to Ed should we want PCR tests to be done for our faculty and staff. And I confirmed that today at a meeting with Michael, and we're all in agreement that we want to keep our facilities open. And sometimes while we might get a positive or even a negative with the antigen and you're symptomatic, we'll be careful and have the PCR done as well. And Ed will be able to do that. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on that process.
Anybody?
You put a good bug in his ear, Jim.
Well, he knew how I felt, believe me. I said I didn't care.
Yeah. I just have a quick question. How confident are you in the state's ability to provide all those tests if this is kind of a state level program?
So they actually have a stockpile already. So they're going to roll it out first with faculty, Tina. So we were probably one of the first districts to get in. Yesterday, as soon as it came out, I polled our staff, and we had 350 folks say, I want to opt in. So we submitted our information. They're supposed to mail out the tests next week on Monday. And then the following week will be students. So they're staggering it. And I feel comfortable that they're going to be able to do that because they have a stockpile currently.
We talked about potentially, I guess, bringing families in, several days after the fact for testing. Are you talking about just the students, or are you talking about the whole family?
No. Students only.
Okay.
Yeah, students only.
And staff, I assume.
Yeah. We don't have, we don't have the capacity. So that's what we're trying to figure out, Mark, is logistically, do we have a single location in a time frame that say we have 2 Mendez positives, right? Those kids need to show up at Ashland Middle School activity room at between the hours of whatever and whatever. we'll test those kids because their school starts first. And then, because it takes 15 minutes still, right? So we've got to wait for the results to occur. Again, I don't want to promise that if we're not able to actually pull that off.
Yeah, and my concern was more that I think you used the word families, and I was a little concerned about the district taking on a responsibility.
Yeah, no, I apologize. Yeah. We'll ask families to bring their kids in. I'll leave it at, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jim.
So that's component one of just the COVID update. I probably have two other little things. One, we've certainly been tracking, and I've been sending out daily updates. I'm at the point now where I don't need to send out daily updates. Our numbers are back down to a very small number, so I'm going back to a like less than 10 across the district. We will go back to our Friday report, just so you know. I've had some families say they like it. Some say, Jim, just stop. So it's sort of a mixed bag, right? As always with communication. But I think, the weekly report, on Fridays will be good. We're definitely seeing families doing the right thing. And I want to emphasize that we've talked a lot for 2+ years here, or it'll be 2 years in March, asking families to do the right thing. They are doing the right thing. And I'm a firm believer in saying thank you to a community when I chastise them once in a while for not doing the right thing. And it still happens. We still have a couple people who aren't doing the right thing, but for the most part, folks are keeping their kids home with symptoms. They're getting them tested. And the majority of our tests, positives, are antigen tests at home, which is great. That's exactly what we want and how it should be working. And we're able to test some symptomatic folk in school. We had a couple staff members who all of a sudden came to school, they were fine. And throughout the day, they just felt crummy. And when we're able to give them the quick antigen test, and some positives, some negatives, and it was great. So staffing wise, we've been in great shape. I know that was the big concern coming out of break was, were we able to maintain our operations? And we've been absolutely. We had more people out because either their kids or their spouses were COVID positive and not necessarily our staff. Attendance rates have gone from a high of 17 to 20% of absentee rate down to as low as 4 and 5, and probably in the last week the highest was around 8%. Our traditional, I've had Karen run these numbers. Our traditional absentee rate at this time is anywhere between 2 and 7%, depending upon the school. The younger schools, Warren, typically, and Pete could probably attest to this, the younger kids typically are out more at this age, this time period of the year, than the older kids. And I don't know if it's because, we have midterms usually coming out of the Martin Luther King weekend, and the older kids are there, or things of that nature. But we also used to have a lot of kids travel and were absent because during this time period. Further questions on COVID? The trend is good. It's good news, the trending. So I feel good about that.
Actually, Jim, I do have one other question. Just
sure.
And if it's too early to say, that's fine. I'm just curious what your thinking is about the mask policy. I think the state kicked it out a little bit further, but
yeah, they kicked it down the road through all of February, right? So
I don't remember how late it was in February, but I thought it's still the 80% rule in there. And
yeah,
I give you the authority to make that call at this point.
Yeah, I'm certainly not looking to make any of those changes until we really see in the region. I would anticipate having that conversation as we come out of February break and see what happens there. But we should be seeing our numbers again. I've been pretty consistent. I think Omicron is going to hit every one of us. Now, whether we're symptomatic and we don't know it, it's that transmissible. I heard from, a presentation that was given by Massachusetts General Hospital International Infectious Disease Specialist, and he's certainly looking at February as the line of we're really starting to get back to some normalcy, and then March really getting into normalcy. So I'd rather be cautious with it.
And Mark, was there a policy conversation you were thinking of having, or was it the operational component?
No, I was really just asking Jim what his thinking was.
Okay.
No, I think our policy is where it needs to be at this point. We've given Jim I think that, as I understand the state guidance, that 80% threshold
Still there.
is still there,
Yeah.
and so we gave Jim that. I just was curious what he was thinking. That's all.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure it was an operational kind of conversation, not necessarily policy.
Yeah, the only component, Mark, that might come up next would be, do we, and I leave this in Kelly and Stephen's court, do we look at the spectator policy component again, right? And that's what the Tri-Valley League and the principals are continuously having those conversations. At what point do we open it back up again a little bit more? So that would be the only foreseeable change coming down the pipeline.
Good enough.
Yep.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
And anything else by way of update, or are you ready to move?
No, that's COVID. 2 years
Okay.
running. Yay.
Equity audit.
As you know, as part of my goals and the school committee goals, we've talked a lot about making sure that we continue our work with DEI, as well as looking at the school district as a whole with regard to equity and how we are approaching equitable opportunities, diversity, inclusion, et cetera. So we went out, we mentioned this at the last meeting, we went out to bid to get some vendors to help us come in and do the equity audit. We had 10, right? Chris and Mike, it was 10. We had 10 vendors submit proposals. Chris, Mike, and I individually went through them and rated them and looked at did they meet the standards that we had asked within the RFP. And then each of us, then we pulled it together and tallied it, and who we came out with in terms of the who we're recommending to work through the audit for us was a company firm called L&P, and they're out of Massachusetts, and they are they've worked with Massachusetts schools before too, which is very positive for us. I want to share just one thing here. Can you see this? The fundamental reasons of why doing an equity audit review?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, good, thanthis. Like I said, I'm on a different screen. I just wanted to highlight, these are areas that, this is the reason why, right? This is why we think this is important. Enable leadership and teams to gain a clear shared understanding of the inequities in relation to the domains and indicators articulated in the review rubric, which they'll have. Guide our district and school teams through a process of self-reflection, directed practice. Develop a data-driven shared understanding of areas to promote effective student learning, prioritized opportunities for student learning, student achievement, engagement, well-being, using research-based approaches and models that are reasonable and attainable for our district, and provide a comprehensive report of findings. This is what they'll give us in recommendations, which will help us springboard the district forward in improving our, our work in the equitable arena, DEI, et cetera. Yes, they'll be looking at a variety of things such as these 5 areas: anti-racist school culture, teacher and staff diversity, healthy and positive working conditions, culturally responsive classroom or curriculum, and family and community engagement. I think that is truly what is encompassing of this process. And I think, Mike, Chris, and I actually had this firm as our, our top firm. They weren't the least expensive, nor were they the most expensive. Chris, would you agree? I think they were sort of right in that. We didn't base it just on the financial component. We based it on, can they meet the needs of our district? And are they familiar with public schools and the work that needs to be done within Massachusetts public schools? So our recommendation is that you, and we approve the funding of this. We have the funds available in our current, budget, and it's significant. And I know that, last time that question came up, how do we fund it? We do have it from some savings in other areas, and we believe this is a critically important process that we undertake. And they'll get started right away, but we need your approval so we can get the contract signed with them.
Questions?
And Jim, can you or Mike or Chris, I guess just, because we're not, obviously the committee didn't have an opportunity to review packets, and that's all well and good. If you could talk a little bit about two things. One, sort of beyond this firm's experience doing work with schools, are they the only firm that's done that, as an example? And just what differentiates them in terms of the quality? And I certainly appreciate that's a critical component. And also just for sort of public knowledge, the range of prices that you receive and where this one falls in the middle there.
So, Chris, I don't know if you have the rubric without any of the scores that you might be able to share.
Without the scores?
Yeah, maybe not. So we there was a rubric that we created that analyzed them. Was it five areas?
Oh yeah, no. So essentially, we asked. I think there were 3 areas that we were looking at, right? On what they did in the
3. Okay.
For how they were going to execute, the time frame, and how well, how it was spelled out, and then their experience level is what it was looked at first, and then second, it was done on, we looked at price, so 2 separate components of it.
So they ranged anywhere from, I'm trying to find my paperwork. I don't know, $35,000 to $110,000, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
so
that sounds about right.
And there were some. So we'll give you an example, Mark. There were a couple firms that had 0 experience. They were basically just getting into the space, into the equity space. There were some larger firms that dealt a lot with university at the university levels, and from a balance standpoint, we just felt like this company had more of what we're looking for in working with the local school systems. They've worked with Milton, Bridgewater, Raynham, as part of the package, you could see it. But that helps us as well.
And what is the cost on this particular contract?
That would be, Chris, do you have that? I'm looking at
it's $65K.
Yep, 65,000.
So Jim, one of the other questions I have is, does this or any of the other proposals have something beyond an initial report as part of the package, right? So I'll liken it to the building project, right? Yep. So we have the commissioning but we also have the vendors that are going to come back and help us for a year or 2 after, tune and do those things to ensure that we're getting the results we wanted, right? And so there's one thing to provide a report and some action items, but what are the subsequent things? Are they coming back and working with us through both the actions and then reevaluation of where those have taken us, and was that are we where we expected to be after taking those actions?
Right. So the answer is yes and no. it's not necessarily part of the 65,000 deliverable to us. But this firm does, and as part of their package, they talk about future work with us. Like they offer those services to ensure that we are on target and that we are meeting our goals. So, and that's part of the planning process that they'll work with us. And yeah, there'd be an additional cost. The other firms did the same thing. So just so you know, there was one firm that was pretty significant cost for them to come back and actually work with us after we started implementing. So, but that's why I'm saying yes and no.
Yes, no, that's fair. And I even, kind of to your point of that there's, I've always questioned, like, we want to get going on this, right?
Yep.
But also this is a relatively new professional services field, right? And so I almost see this as, we're probably going to do this, but we're probably going to do it again at some point, potentially with a different firm, right? Yep. As this field matures and they're able to provide more value than this relatively new professional services field, right?
Yeah, and I agree, and I think Mike can could chime in on the work that we're currently doing, where with Des and Chris, and the folks there will help us implement some of this stuff as well. That's the difference. So we've got consultants who are working currently with our district as well as our administrative team, and hopefully this information that comes in will be able to parlay into the work that Des and Chris are doing. So Mike, you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. And part of the early work that Des and Chris have already done is a data collection piece of it. And many of the firms talked about the need to be able to collect data and get the data that we want to look at. And Des and Chris have already started that process with us. So we're a little bit of ahead of the game even. And then, one of the things that Des and Chris talk about is how we can take what we've already done moving forward, and they'll help generate a plan for the future as well. I mean, one of the things that they continually say to us is this needs to be sustainable work. And that's why it's so important that the school-based teams are formed. And I know that, Kelly's school-based team has done a tremendous job. That's part of the reporting I'm going to be doing later on today. And I know Dave is working hard with his staff right now to form a team through the leadership of Chris and Des. So I think we're in good shape. And I think that this equity audit is going to really help tell us what we've done well, where we need to improve. And then, with the two folks combined, we'll really be able to move forward positively.
And was the evaluation of any of the firms, what they're able, that second piece, I know it might be additional cost, but was that a consideration in your thought process on selecting this one? Do we think that there's potential value if we want to engage them in the future services?
It wasn't part of the rubric, but yes, it was absolutely part of the review that I know I undertook when I looked at the entire scope of the work that they were providing. Yes. Okay. And again, I just feel like this firm came out on top for all of us. There were a couple that were other closer, but that we just felt more comfortable with this one.
That's great.
And I want to, before we move on and take the vote, if you would, one of the reviews is dealing with family community engagement. And I wanted Kathy just to speak quickly because it falls within this sector, if you will. It's not out of bounds with the agenda. But I want Kathy to explain what's happening on the L side of things quickly, because I think it's really important.
Thanks. I got a little bit excited because I've been trying for probably a little over 2 years to get what's called the Bilingual Parent Advisory Council up and running. And it's been a challenge. And of course, the challenge starts with trying to have good outreach to families whose first language is not English and be able to communicate the invitation to come and be a part of a group of parents who will help support the district's efforts to educate English language learners. This year, I've been able to collaborate with 3 fairly committed parents who represent Russian, Japanese, and Brazilian backgrounds. And we had our third meeting of what we're calling the AB PAC, or the Ashland Bilingual Parent Advisory Council, last evening. We talked a little bit about the tiered focus monitoring preliminary results. And we also were able to talk about, we're about to launch a Facebook page, which will continue to do that outreach. And Jim had this wonderful idea, and Esmeralda immediately said she'd love to help out the AB PAC with some of that outreach, and certainly with all of those efforts on our Facebook page, and come help us continue these efforts. So I'm excited because I feel like something that's been hard to start to get going is now feeling like it's got that initial, momentum, bringing us into sustainability.
Great news.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is excellent. I have a quick question, Kathy. And back at the beginning of the year when we discussed like school committee liaisons to different groups, I know we discussed this, but it wasn't up and running yet. And if I remember correctly, I think I was the person that might be the liaison to this group. I think I'll have to double check the minutes and make sure we actually assigned a person since it wasn't up and running yet. But I'd love to connect and come to those meetings as well too.
Tina, I would love it. I'll keep you in the loop as well if you want, even before kind of making it a more formal school committee.
I think we already did, but I want to double check.
We'll go back through and look. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that would be great. I would absolutely love it. And I know that the group would love it because it opens those doors of communication and the collaboration that we're all trying to achieve. So that's excellent. Thank you.
So I guess what I'm looking for then is just for the committee to approve us entering into the contract with L&P Educational Services for the $65,000 contract.
Jim, I just have a quick question. You mentioned that we do have the money for this right now. Can you just help explain, because it's under our current operating budget, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Yep. So where did kind of the cost savings come from, and what does that look like?
I don't want to get into the 30 buckets. Let's just say
Fair enough.
we have savings that occur throughout the summer and throughout the hiring process and the lack of hiring process. So mainly from a salary standpoint, Tina, we would have the savings this year. So for instance, if we hired a teacher at less money than the person who was leaving, or we've had positions we haven't been able to fill up until this time. Kathy and her folks have done a nice job with, we've kept some kids in who we anticipated having to be out for the entire year. Now, some of them are going out now, but that being said, we had some savings there. So there are a variety of buckets that throughout the year we're monitoring each line. So I can't say one specific line, but
that's fine.
Yeah, there are, Chris does a really good job of saying, Jim, we can't, or we're not, and we track those big buckets, if you will.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
And just from a procedural stuff, this is something there we don't necessarily need to do it this way. I think Jim wants to have us discuss it and vote on it here to have it in public and things like that. He and Chris are certainly able within the operating budget to do contracted services like this in general. But Jim, correct me if I'm misstating it. But
no, you're right. I think this is a very important component and goal for all of us, and that goes back to the school committee. And I think we should discuss it. It's a big number, and in the next phase of even the strategic plan is a big number. Those are all things that we need to be mindful of. That's all.
Yeah.
And just logistically, are we going to need to at some point do any kind of budget line transfers to get the money in the right place to take care of this, or is...
we haven't come back with budget line transfers, but we could. Okay. We certainly.
I remember the ones we do at the end of the year, but
that's probably where we would do it, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I guess I moved to authorize superintendent to enter into a contract with L&P. Is that the proper?
Correct.
L&P,
yep.
L&P to perform an equity audit on the Ashland Public Schools.
Second.
And then all in favor, Tina,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Aaron,
You muted yourself. There you go.
and I for me. Thank you. All right. We all set with that? Moving forward, okay. Moving forward to the open meeting law complaint resolution. Mr. Steve Morgan had, you might recall, filed an initial complaint about a letter that I wrote regarding the Mendez School Building Project. And the committee went into executive session to discuss it per the advice of our attorney. And then Mr. Morgan filed another complaint saying that it was improper for us to discuss this matter in executive session. So this is the finding on part 2, that it was appropriate for us to meet in executive session. There apparently have been a number of findings in other matters that have established this right to do that. And so the finding was against Mr. Morgan on this particular open meeting law complaint. So I just wanted to report that out to all of you and to the community. And any questions or comments? I don't have a finding on the part A yet, but we'll report back if and when that comes along.
And Lori, just to be clear, the finding you're referring to is from the Attorney General's office, right?
It's from the Attorney General's office, and that specifically, we did not break open meeting law by entering executive session to discuss an open meeting law complaint. So also good to know for future reference that that is an appropriate use of the executive session purposes. And still waiting on the other complaint, though, that was filed prior to this one, but I think sometimes they're handled by different members in the AG's office, so it might just take, more time depending on who's handling it, or maybe if it's more straightforward, as this appears to be at this point, they can get a decision out more quickly. So still waiting on the other part of it, but it's not even the other part of it. There are 2 separate complaints. But in this particular matter, the finding was that we did not break open meeting law. Anybody else have anything on that? Excellent. That's good news. Mark, you're up next with an update, if you have one, on the MSBA resolutions.
Yeah, just an issue I think I flagged at the end of our last meeting, and because it was a fairly long one, I was fairly brief about it. And so what I wanted to share is, as folks know, I'm on the MASC Board of Directors. And one of the things that the board has been talking about is the process that's used for adopting resolutions by the MASC membership. Right? So every year we get a packet of some number, usually 6, 8, 10 different resolutions. We talk about what our position is. We send somebody to the delegate assembly at the November conference. And then all the other delegates from other school districts that choose to participate vote on whether to support those resolutions. And those resolutions then become part of the advocacy agenda for the organization. It's really a way to set that advocacy agenda. So one of the things that the board has been concerned about, the MASC board has been concerned about, is how the participation works with that. Because what generally happens is there usually 1 or 2 school districts that are regularly involved in that. Framingham, as an example, always seems to have 1 or 2 things that they've submitted. And then there are a series of other ones that are set up by the board of directors through the legislative committee. And so they are referenced as MASC board resolutions. And, the thing that I think the MASC is looking to really try to do is make that process more accessible, and to encourage school committees to be thinking about what are the things that are of concern to us that predominantly could be addressed in some fashion at the state level. Some of the resolutions, as we've seen in the past, do address federal level things, but that's less common, and I think realistically not where any clout that the organization has is. We can only talk to local reps at that level, generally speaking. And the National School Board Association does a lot of the national advocacy. So really what I wanted to address is just to make people aware of the fact that the board is looking to engage committees at the local level in that process, and is working on, and how we're doing this is not yet established, but is working on how to make that process more accessible. There probably will be more communication coming out, and really the legislative committee, which I also participate in, is looking to really kind of create a model where if you had an idea, a thought, something you're interested in, that either if it's something the committee's interested in or individual members, they can reach out to the legislative committee and say, I don't know how to write this. I don't know how to make this into a resolution, but this is what I'm thinking about. And to sort of shepherd that through the process and turn a thought or an idea into a resolution. And then it would go through the normal review process to figure out whether it gets recommended by the board and presented to the group as a whole, the MAC membership as a whole. So like I said, I want to make people aware of that. I don't have the specific process that's going to be followed yet and how they're going to sort of set out to achieve that goal. We were actually supposed to have a board retreat 2 weeks ago. And then due to COVID, we decided to reschedule into February. And I think this will be one of the topics that's discussed there. So if there's more that's relevant to us, I'll bring that back. But that's what I wanted to share. I'm happy to answer any questions people have about it.
Questions for Mark?
I think it sounds like heading in a positive direction. It's also good if there's some assistance to crafting it so that it does have a more cohesive voice, if you will, right? And rather than drafted by different groups, so having some formalized process or just some help, and I think there's a lot of benefit to doing that, and then there can be some that group that has a more broad vision and interaction with a lot of different committees and different entities, including potentially advocacies at the state level, might take that idea and be able to augment it too, right? And then we get better resolutions that way, right? So
yeah, and I do believe that the committee that works on these does work with the people who submit them to sort of get them into prime time form, but I'm not that familiar with that part of the process yet.
Any other questions or comments for Mark? Thanks, Mark. Thanks for participating on those committees and bringing that info back to us. It would be nice if that process were every year, right? We're always, opening that thing and trying to slug through them. And yeah. So thank you. Next up, Jim, the minimum wage rate increase. You're on mute.
I will turn that over to Chris.
Hello. Yep, we're trying to increase the minimum wage to follow the new minimum wage that was just instituted at the beginning of the calendar year. So we'd be going from $13.50 to $14.25. So we're looking for your approval to do that, which I don't. Yeah. So that's what our request is tonight.
Does anybody have any questions about that?
Chris, can you just talk about the operational impact? How many positions we have that would be positions or people that would be impacted by that? What kind they are?
Sure. Well, I think the majority of them are substitutes, specifically in the nutrition area, the EDP area, and the facilities area. So it's not actual, from my understanding, it's not the actual day-to-day operations. It's more or less on the substitute level.
And we do recognize. Oh, sorry, Mark.
No, go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say we do recognize this. Yeah, we do recognize it's not something we have to do. We do, but it's the right thing to do for our employees, and And that's, Chris and I had that conversation. So.
So, and that's what I was going to ask, that Mark has brought this up before about what our obligations are relative to federal versus state. And so if you can, maybe add some additional commentary around this is what the minimum wage increase, where it's coming from, and what our obligations are, and also just what we're doing and why, right?
Who are you asking for that, Paul? Me?
Well, Chris, I mean,
okay, go ahead, Mark.
Chris or Jim could do it. You could probably do it as well, but I was going to Chris or Jim.
Right.
But.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding of it is that, it's not a something that we're obligated to follow, but it's something that we would follow. I mean, it's staffing's a challenge as it is, and going less than the minimum wage would make it next to, it would be a challenge for us. And like I said, it is the right thing to do. I have to look, to be honest with you, I believe it's federal. Because they have the Boston minimum wage versus the Massachusetts minimum wage. I need to refresh my mind on that. But it's because if you use the Boston one, it would be higher than the $14.25. So I believe it's the federal.
It is federal. Yep. It's the federal minimum wage. Right.
So the federal minimum wage is actually a lot lower. It's like $7.25. It's the state minimum wage that went up to the $14.25.
Oh, sorry.
In January.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
And but I think the key point, just for people's understanding about why we're talking about this, is if it's permissive, right, is that the state minimum wage doesn't apply to municipal entities like the school district. So we're only legally required to adhere to the federal minimum wage, but for the reasons that Chris articulated, retention, attraction of staff, being competitive, being pragmatic, doing the right thing for our employees. We've done this every time the state raises the minimum. We have done the same.
And I agree, it's the right thing to do. I'm just wondering, Chris, do you have kind of a ballpark estimate of the cost and kind of what the impact on the budget will look like? I know that may be hard to quantify.
No, honestly, I don't. Honestly, I don't think it's material at all. The incremental expense. And I'd have to come back to you to get what the overall expenditure is for for a daily substitute, but the net impact to our operation will be minimal.
So we're talking, though, cafeteria, nutrition services, as well as EDP are funded outside of the operating budget, right? So those individuals will be impacted in those budgets, not our operating budget. So it's even smaller number of folks.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking, summer staff. We bring our summer staff on for facilities, things of that nature. And if we really are in the need to bring in day-to-day subs for operations.
Any other concerns, or is there somebody ready to offer a motion?
I mean, I can do a motion that I move that we now. So we've typically, I think when we've done this in the past, we've actually said the positions we're doing, or I don't think we've ever made a blanket statement and said minimum wage to something. We've always named the positions, I thought. Jim, keep me honest here.
I can't keep you honest. I don't remember.
I believe, because I don't think it would really, it's nutrition staff, EDP staff, and facilities, daily subs is what we're talking about.
But I mean, I think it would be better not to limit it in any way in case.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so if you have building-based subs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why we would have to spell that out if the intention is to not pay anybody less than that.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's specific enough. I'm pretty sure in the past we have, when we've done these increases.
Well, I think, Paul, that's only come up when we've been talking about a certain goal, like that we were trying to raise, like the substitute teacher pay or whatever. It's only, I think this is, the request in and of itself is more general.
Okay, yeah.
That's how I'm hearing it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're yeah, we're making the right motion and authorizing the right thing.
Why don't we just make a motion to raise the district's minimum wage to $14.25? Does that work?
I'll second that, if that was your motion.
I'll make it a motion. I move that we raise the district's minimum wage to $14.25.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And all in favor, Paul?
Yes.
Mark?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And aye for me. Thank you. Okay, Assistant Superintendent update, Mike, if
Yep,
you have one.
Sure.
Yeah,
On Friday the 14th, we had our final full day of professional development for the year. It's a couple quick highlights from it. We received really great feedback from the work that happened at Pitaway. Or the staff there was excited about the Life is Good presentation that was organized by Ms. Davidson. And we also got really great feedback from our specialized programming staff who were able to get together to have some really critical conversations regarding the work that is done vertically, and to get some vertical planning for the future to make sure that our students are getting exactly what they need when they need it as they move on from one school to the next, in terms of the real specialized programming that happens there for those really unique learners. So that was excellent work that was done, and our staff was really excited to be able to take part in that. Other things that have been going on, we want to thank the folks from area who have donated a significant number of books to our various schools in order to build our collection of culturally proficient literature. Excited to partner with area to do that, and they were really happy to be able to present our principals with those books. I know that they are being displayed throughout the schools and libraries and have been provided to the various teachers to make sure that they get in the hands of our educators as well as our students. And finally, in that realm, our CARES team at the high school, led by Mary Nemeth, has been doing a fantastic job all year long. That CARES stands for Clockers for Anti-Racism, Equity, and Social Justice. And they've presented a number of wonderful professional learning opportunities for students and staff to be able to take part in. And I was able to lead one last night with Christine Carney, and it was really our pleasure to do a discussion group on the movie Do the Right Thing. And I wanted to bring it up because I was just so impressed with the students who took part in that discussion. And it just speaks volumes to the work that's being done by the high school staff and Kelly and her folks over there. Those kids were just so impressive. The thoughtfulness and the way they articulated the need for us to make change and to be the change was a true testament to what we're doing here in Ashland. And I think we should all be very proud.
thanks, Mike. Any questions? Comments?
Jim raised his hand.
I raised my hand just after it's all done. I just wanted to confirm back. I went back to the last time we adjusted the minimum wage. And our motion then was just to move to approve increasing hourly salaries to meet the new minimum hourly wage set at $13.50 then. So we're good.
Go.
Yep. Just wanted to verify it. Sorry.
Thanks. Okay, looks like we can move back to you, Paul, for the warrant approvals.
Sure. All right, between January 7th, 2022 and January 20th, 2022, I, Paul Kendall, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $260,599.56. This includes general fund expenses of $154,613.95, revolving expenses of $103,265.92, and grant expenses of $2,719.69.
Thank you, Paul. And now back to you, Jim, on the appointment of Director of Student Services Search Subcommittee.
Yeah, so just part of the policy that we have for central office staff is to have a screening committee that will eventually recommend up to, well, it'll recommend 3 or more individuals to the school committee for interview process. As you know, it's your appointment for the Director of Student Services. And we went out to ask folks who wanted to participate. And we had Tina was appointed from the board standpoint, but we do have other folks who are participating. And I just want, as a screening committee, in our ability, and Mark, correct me, please keep me honest with this one, just to make sure that, as I post the meetings and ensure that we are doing everything we need to do from an open meeting law perspective and protecting confidentiality of those folks who are applying, whether or not I need to post or not. I think it's important we do approve the subcommittee.
The meetings need to be posted.
Yep.
The issue is when you can be in executive session. And so when you have a screening committee that is acting, and the law uses the term, I think, preliminary screening committee.
Yep.
That it's permitted to be in executive session until it gets to a point of recommending or discussing fewer than 3 candidates.
Okay.
And at that point, there should be a recommendation coming out and becoming public.
Yep.
That's a general model that you need to follow.
So we should approve the members. I'm going to share a screen with you for the Director of Student Services Preliminary Screening Committee.
Yeah, so Jim, this is the same thing we've done,
Yep.
For the building project as well.
Yep. Yeah. So these are the individuals. It's made up of parents, educators, administrators, paraprofessionals, ESPs, directors, etc. So it's a great turnout. I'm very pleased with the turnout, and a number of folks who haven't typically been involved in things in terms of searches, etc. So it's a nice cross section. And don't worry about the highlighted. It's just when I typed in names, it pops up. Some of them have email addresses in my contacts, so it just does that in Google Docs.
So we're looking for the creation of this screening committee and then the appointment of these members, right?
Yes.
So
I wanted to, before we have a motion, I just wanted to disclose that Andrea Braga is my next door neighbor, and I will certainly be supporting her, but I feel like just in the interest of disclosure, I'm disclosing. I don't think it creates a legal conflict of interest.
No. Not unless you're going to financially gain from this.
Not that I'm aware of.
All right. So
let's create the subcommittee. Then
So what are we calling the subcommittee? Because you'll have that.
The Director of Student Services Preliminary Screening Committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would make a motion to create a subcommittee for preliminary screening subcommittee for the Director of Student Services.
Second.
Do we need to list the names?
Well, we can appoint after. I think we've a lot of times done, at least in the building committee, we create it and then we appoint separately, but doesn't matter to me.
Okay. All in favor? Tina?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And aye for me. Thanks.
And Jim, there's no ex officio. These are all voting members, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, you want to do this one? I'm awful with. I think I could do all the names, but you probably are better at better saying the names than I am. So I don't want to butcher anybody's name.
You want to say them instead of just sort of have
As presented.
Appointed as recommended by the super.
I think we're supposed to say them, but I don't know.
All right, I'll do it. I move to appoint. I move to appoint the following people. All apologies for mispronunciations. to be members of the Director of Student Services Preliminary Screening Committee: Charlene Bishop, Christine Cavaney, Jane Guiney, Kelly St. Kerr, Joe Chiminetti, Jimmy Phillips, Marie Melnick. This next one is tough. Tina Botanides, Sarah Davidson, Andrea Braga, Laura McMahon, Jen Cutler, Tricia Davis, Colleen Brewer, Jen Caputo, and Liz Childress.
Well done, Mark.
Did I get you right, Tina?
I second.
Excellent. And then all in favor, Tina,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
and I. So that passes, and we can move on to the consent actions, starting with the January 6th, 2022 minutes. Anybody? And hearing nothing, I'll take a motion to approve those minutes of January 6th, 2022.
I'll move to approve the regular session minutes of January 6, 2022 as presented.
Second.
All in favor, Erin? Tina?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I. And then the member updates.
What's,
Got something.
do we have any gifts or?
I do.
Oh, sorry, Jim.
Yep, no worries. No
Gifts and
worries.
donations.
I do. Karen Dunn, $1,000 to HS Student Activities, the class of 2025. The Boston Athletic Association, $1,000 to the HS Student Activities, the Model UN Club. Decisions at every turn in Ashland Residents for Equity in Action, $111.70 for 10 new books donated to the Ashland Middle School. Decisions at every turn, Ashland Residents for Equity in Action, again, $183.09 for 26 new books donated to the Mendez School. Decisions at every turn, Ashland Residents for Equity in Action, $181.12 for 16 new books donated to Warren. Decisions at every turn, Ashland Residents for Equity in Action, $188.84 for 16 new books to the Ashland Pitaway School. And again, decisions at every turn in Ashland Residents for Equity in Action, $195.25, 16 new books donated to Ashland High School for a grand total of $2,860.
We have a motion to accept the gifts and donations.
So move.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor, Tina,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Mark? Aye. And then member updates. Anybody?
I'll just report that we had site council earlier today with Ms. Sinker. And there was some good discussion about a number of different issues. I mean, they're going to be looking at the handbook update as occurs every year. A lot of discussion about final exams, or I'm sorry, midterm exams. And you know, for those of you who have high school kids, I probably saw an email earlier about sort of reducing the weight given to midterms. But there are just discussions starting to happen. They're continuing to happen around how to use midterms, whether they should be continued and things like that. So certainly nothing dispositive, but just topics of discussion that a lot of people spend some good time on. So good conversation.
Thanks, Mark. Anybody else?
I just report there was an AshPAC meeting last week. That was great. Kathy was able to give kind of a further update on the tiered focus monitoring and where that stands, and kind of how that's all playing out and what it looks like. And we had some of a little bit of discussion around the upcoming budget discussions, and so just kind of as a reminder to all of us that as we speak about the budget, just to be mindful of how we discuss it. And how we discuss the different expenditures, just to make sure that we're, continually talking about the needs of all of our students. And, AshPAC was very cognizant of the fact that we do, and, that we do really look at the needs of all of our students, but we want to just be careful in the words that we choose to make sure that the impression given to the public doesn't single out certain line items for different, special ed versus general ed issues, which is always a helpful reminder that words matter and just to be careful and, cognizant of how we discuss them.
Thank you, Tina. Anybody else?
So I guess I'll go if everybody else is done. So, and keep me honest here, Jim, as far as if I'm missing anything. So the work, excavation and site work continues. Today was the first blast. So blasting started today. Claudia and I went on site and asked the team, where is the absolute most impactful place that we can be with this blast, so we can experience, for lack of a better term, the worst of it. And so they start where they were blasting. If you're familiar with where we have described where the ledge is closest to the building. So just if you're looking out the back of the building and you know where the grave is, to the left of the grave, you know, kind of towards the building. So Claudia, along with Chief Moorhan or Captain Moorhan and Chief Roby, were in the end of the hallway, right at the doors there when the blast went off, so we could experience it. I think there was a couple of teachers that had stuck around. This was after school. I think they wanted to just experience it before they experienced it with the kids during the day, because we have 2 blasts that will occur, one during the school day and one after the school day. And so we experienced it. It went boom. We felt it, and you know, and that's about it from there. So that has started, and so again, that'll be two blasts a day, maybe not each day, and you know, depend on what they're on many factors, but I'm expecting that they'll continue tomorrow. And so I actually talked to a parent who had a child that was in the building in one of the rooms while it was happening. So I talked to them for a little bit and talked to her about what she felt, and she's like, "Yeah, I felt it. You know, it was no big deal to her." Some of the adults were, when you're further in the building, you could feel that, but they couldn't hear. So what they do is 5 minutes and then 1 minute and different things. They have these horns that blast to signify that the blast is coming. And you can't hear those further in the building, but you could feel this. And so some of the adults in the building were like, "Yeah, I didn't know what that." You know, initially I was shocked by it because they weren't sure. They weren't expecting it because they didn't hear the other things. So that's started. And I think last time I talked about the trailers being set up and things like that. So we're continuing to, we're probably pretty close. Esmer is helping us develop a more formal looking and formal process for some of our communications. Right now, it's just me sending email and copying and pasting a list of emails of neighbors that have expressed an interest in receiving them. So don't know there's much change since our last meeting, aside from that the blasting has started.
And how long is that going to go on for again, Paul? Like how many weeks or days or whatever?
I don't know that we have a number. I think initially when they were planning, I believe it was starting on the 3rd and going for 45 days. I think they thought they might need to blast. We've experienced less ledge, so we didn't even start until now. So, you know, maybe that's 30 days. It's hard to say. It probably depends on how much how much comes out each blast and things like that. So as they'll learn from this blast, they'll learn to, you know, and maybe not this blast as much as the next one, right? So I asked the team to talk to the contractor. My thought is that this was probably the most impactful from what some people are going to feel blast. And the reason I think that is, if you think about it, you know, this was a first blast. And so we have this mound, this mound of ledge, and the first blast you drill in and you haven't created a space for the relief of that force, right? And so it's gonna be more impactful potentially the next blast where you now have a side that they're excavating to. And so when the next one goes, it blows the rock and expels some of that force more to the side. So they're going to confirm that, but I'm assuming that this blast was probably going to have a bigger impact and bigger shake than some of the other ones. And they'll also, as they'll move kind of up the hill a bit, away from the building. It's away from the building because the closest spot is, if you know that, where the old neighborhood hallway is. So that goes back to right near where this blast was, and they'll be moving back towards up the hill, and so that will just inherently be moving away from the building. And yeah, the building is, and the nice thing about this from an impact to the neighbors is by far the most impacted structure is the building, right? It's not even close to any residence. So, and they place a seismograph at the building because even though it's our building, they still need to execute these blasts and stay within the normal accepted ranges. And so this should be a non-event for neighbors. Not that they won't hear it, not that they probably, they may feel something, but certainly the brunt of it, Claudia and I felt more than anyone's ever going to feel today. So.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else have anything they want to share? Okay, there's been nothing new added to the list of action items. Our next meeting is early February. Jim will be away, but Mike will be with us. And we will see you then. If somebody has a motion to adjourn, we can say goodnight.
To adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, Aaron?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
And I. So good night, everyone. Thank you for everything, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Thank you.